It started on a Sunday, the kind of afternoon meant for small chores and background music. I was cleaning out drawers in the study, not snooping, just sorting. Dust, pens, unpaid bills, and then a notebook I didn't recognize. Brown leather, crisp corners. New. My name's Claire, 38. I teach literature, which means I spend most of my days explaining metaphors and warning students not to mistake symbols for truth. I should have known how to read subtext before it swallowed me. Michael, my husband, is an architect. Meticulous, self-contained, the kind of man who sketches every decision before living it. He calls it precision. I used to call it control. The notebook looked expensive, deliberate. I almost put it aside. But curiosity, that quiet academic instinct, won. The first page was dated just 3 months ago. The first line read, "Dear future wife." At first I laughed. A writing exercise, I thought. Or maybe one of those gratitude journals his therapist recommended. But the laughter didn't last. The handwriting was too neat, the tone too careful. Tender in a way he hadn't been with me in years. And the wife he was describing, she loved late-night jazz, hated mornings, wanted to live near the ocean. I don't like jazz. I'm allergic to salt air. I thought it was a joke at first, until I turned the page and realized the wife he was writing to didn't sound like me. I know what you're thinking. You don't read someone's private writing. You respect their space, their thoughts, their boundaries. But before you judge me, understand this. I wasn't looking for proof. I was looking for reassurance. Michael and I were fine. Not passionate, not broken, just fine. The kind of marriage that looks respectable from the outside and quietly empties itself on the inside. He's thoughtful in the way architects are, detail-oriented, precise, always fixing the structure, never the feeling. He leaves the hallway lights on but the emotions off. Our life runs on quiet systems. Dinners in near silence, Netflix half-watched, weekend trips that feel like shared assignments. We don't fight, we don't flirt, we just coexist gracefully. And when you live in that kind of stillness long enough, you start mistaking silence for peace. So yes, I knew it was wrong to keep reading, but guilt doesn't weigh much when curiosity starts to sound like survival. Every line I turned was a small negotiation. Stop now, one more page, stop now, just one more. And somewhere between those pages, between his future wife and the life I thought we were building, I crossed a line that had been waiting for me all along. You can tell yourself you're just flipping pages until one of them cuts you. We met at a university seminar, one of those evening workshops where people who still believe in meaning gather to discuss dead poets. He was the guest speaker, all composure and clean logic. I was the student who asked too many questions. He told me afterward that he'd admired my essays, said I had a precise way of dismantling emotion. I told him I admired his certainty, the way he spoke as if truth were something you could draft to scale. Our relationship began on paper, long emails, annotated love letters, shared books with margins full of small wars, his practicality wrestling with my sentiment. Marriage came quietly, like most of our choices. A calm decision, not a fever. A shared apartment, a modest ceremony, 2 careers orbiting side by side. He designed homes, I taught literature. He shaped other people's dreams. I taught teenagers how to interpret theirs. We talked about having kids once, twice, and then not again. It wasn't tragedy, just inertia. A mutual decision by omission. We built a quiet life, just not the kind that keeps you awake at night. I remember one evening, he was journaling in bed, pen moving quick, shoulders relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in months. When I asked what he was working on, he smiled, said, "It helps me think." I thought it was work. Sketches, budgets, something with deadlines and blueprints. Maybe I should have asked what he was designing when he smiled like that. I told myself I'd only read one more page, then another, and another. The future wife took shape slowly. A woman with paint on her hands, books half-finished, laughter that filled rooms. She was spontaneous, unstructured, restless. None of those words had ever described me. He wrote to her like a man remembering, not imagining. Lines about the house we'll build, about how you laugh when the dog knocks over the coffee. We don't have a dog. We don't laugh over coffee. We drink it separately, silently. His black, mine with milk. Each paragraph felt like trespassing into a life that already existed, one I'd been edited out of long before I noticed. What hurt wasn't just the infidelity of thought, it was the creative reinvention of him. The man who once called emotions inefficient was now writing love letters worthy of his younger self. I turned another page and something slipped out, a folded sheet tucked between the margins. At first, I thought it was a photograph, but it was a drawing, a blueprint. A 2-story house by the sea. Every line sharp, deliberate, signed in his initials. MR in the corner, a small, handwritten label. Project E. The rooms were annotated: studio, reading nook, guest suite. There were notes about the ocean view, the garden layout, the sound of waves soft enough to sleep beside. He wasn't fantasizing, he was planning. The future wife wasn't a dream. She was an address waiting to be built. I stared at the floor plan until the lines blurred into static. He wasn't daydreaming. He was documenting the life he'd already chosen to live. Just not with me. I didn't confront him that night. I closed the notebook, smoothed the pages like I was pressing down a wound, and put it back in the drawer where I'd found it. For the next few days, I studied him the way I'd study a difficult text. Line by line, gesture by gesture, looking for what wasn't being said. He moved differently now, lighter somehow. His phone lived face down on the counter. His humming returned, small, thoughtless tunes that used to fill our mornings years ago. It should have made me happy. It didn't. At dinner one evening, I asked as casually as I could, "How's the new project?" He didn't look up. "Oh, just conceptual sketches. Nothing real yet." He smiled when he said yet. The next afternoon, I stopped by his office to drop off lunch. The receptionist smiled too easily. His door was ajar. On his desk, the same sketch I'd seen tucked inside the journal, the seaside house, the wide windows, the same signature in the corner. Project E. While I waited, one of his coworkers, a junior architect I'd met at a company dinner, made polite conversation. When I mentioned Project E, she nodded knowingly. "Oh, that one's different," she said. "Private commission. He's a writer, I think. He's been meeting her off-site. Something about helping her visualize her next book." Her tone was neutral. Mine wasn't, "E wasn't a building, E was a woman." I didn't ask for details. I didn't need to. Writers, muses, metaphors. I know how those stories go. I used to be one. That night, I went home and opened the journal again. My hands were steady this time. I wanted to know when I'd stopped being his inspiration and become his editor, trimming the excess while someone else got the drafts. Halfway through, I found it. An entry dated 3 weeks ago. "Dear future wife, I've finally met you. You remind me that life can still feel unwritten." I read it 3 times. I wasn't jealous of her. I was jealous of the version of him that still believed in something. The days that followed felt eerily normal. I taught my classes, graded essays about themes of deception, and underlined student sentences like, "Truth is subjective," while trying not to laugh. I deleted half-written texts to him, checked his calendar under the guise of scheduling appointments, measured the distance between his commute and the ocean. None of it proved anything concrete, but the math kept adding up wrong. And then, ironically, he became more attentive. Flowers on Tuesdays, home-cooked dinners, compliments rehearsed with care. Guilt always comes wrapped in good manners. I told myself to wait, to let him confess on his own, the way characters in novels eventually do. But real life has no climactic reveal, only slow, inconvenient proof. It arrived one night in the form of a courier. A slim envelope, thick paper, our address handwritten neatly. I signed for it without thinking. It was addressed to Michael and Eliza. The name hit like déjà vu. Eliza, the writer. I opened it. Slowly. Carefully. Because some truths deserve ceremony. Inside was a letter from a publishing house typed on embossed stationery. "Thank you for your creative collaboration on the novel's architectural concept and setting," it read. Both names, Eliza Harper and Michael Rowe, printed side by side. The project wasn't architectural. It was personal. He hadn't been building her a house. He'd been building her a world. When he came home, I left the letter on the kitchen table beside his dinner plate. He read it once, blinked, and said, "It's not what you think. She just needed help. A technical consultant. It got close, but it's not an affair. It's art." I stared at him, feeling nothing but the faint hum of disappointment. "So what does that make me?" I asked. "A rough draft?" He looked at me like I was being unkind for finally reading between the lines. He didn't lie. He just edited the truth until it looked like progress. Weeks passed like someone had turned the volume down on our lives. We still shared a roof, but not a room. I moved into the guest bedroom, the one we used to call temporary. As if distance could ever be something you only try on. He kept writing. Late nights, desk lamp glowing under the door. I stopped asking what he was working on. I stopped reading, too. Words had become dangerous currency between us. One afternoon, on my way home from work, I wandered into a bookstore. More out of habit than intention. Near the front was a promotional display. Eliza Harper. Blueprints of the Heart. The cover showed a watercolor rendering of a house by the sea. The same angles, the same windows, the same dream I'd found in his journal. I opened a copy and flipped to the acknowledgments. 2M. For reminding me what building something real looks like. There it was. Our marriage condensed into an initial. An inspiration credit. I didn't cry. The tears had dried weeks ago, somewhere between the first lie and the last excuse. I bought a copy, took it home, and signed the inside cover in pen. For the wife who wasn't future enough. Then I left it on his desk, beside the notebook. He didn't come home that night. Or the next. Maybe betrayal isn't about sex. Maybe it's about authorship. The quiet horror of someone rewriting the story you thought you were co-authoring, then leaving you as a footnote. It struck me later, alone in bed, how naive I'd been. The journal hadn't been a fantasy at all. It was a confession written in plain sight. The future wife wasn't metaphorical. She was just next. By the time I stopped reading, I wasn't even angry. I just felt like a chapter he'd already proofread. It's been months. I still wear my ring. Not out of hope, just habit. Habit weighs less than grief. I teach my classes like always. Teenagers dissecting unreliable narrators, arguing about truth and perception, unaware they're describing adulthood. Last week, one of them asked me, "Do people really change?" I smiled before answering. "They don't," I said. "They just start writing in different genres." The house feels hollow now, the air too clean, the walls too careful. I'm moving out soon, slowly, packing boxes like punctuation marks, one for clothes, one for books, one for everything I mistook for permanence. When I reach the study, I find the journal again, the leather cover dulled by dust, pages still heavy with what I haven't read. For a second, I almost open it. Then I don't. He wrote to his future wife, and I kept living like his past tense. The cruel thing about love isn't losing the person, it's realizing they already left the story before you even noticed the plot twist. I seal the last box and take one last look around the room that used to be ours. His drafts, my lessons, our shared grammar of routine. Some stories end in death, ours ended in publication. And somewhere, between her printed acknowledgments and my silence, I finally understood the difference between being written about and being written off.